Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Monday, the 2nd of September 2019. And it's a fresh morning up here on the edge of Dartmoor. Beautiful view out to the English Channel. In fact, the early morning sun is reflecting very much off the sea at the moment. So enjoy my early morning constitution up here by taking a hike up Hay Tour, which has just cleared out of the mist. Anyway, here we are. Last few weeks of summer, heading into the autumn term. And of course, we've got a pretty exciting time ahead of us, one way or another, because in 2 months, or just a bit under now, hopefully we will be out of the EU and Britain will once again be able to pretend that it's a sovereign nation. Of course, sadly, it won't be sovereign because the corporatocracy will still have their grip on the current parliamentarians. Unfortunately, they are all pretty much in the pocket of the corporatocracy. And so even once we're out of the EU, of course, the corporatist pressure will be extreme. And a lot of that pressure will be to sign dodgy trade deals with countries like the US of A, which have almost no standards whatsoever. In fact, you can pretty much produce anything and sell anything as long as it makes money. And if a few people happen to die along the way, well, that's just collateral, isn't it? Well, that sadly is the attitude of the corporatists, driven purely by greed. No such thing as empathy or compassion for the rest of humanity. And it's exactly 1 week ago today that the earth moved for a significant number of people in the Blackpool area, when Quadrilla, although they weren't fracking at the time, but their fracking activities, which recommenced on August the 15th and had triggered in excess of 100 seismic events, many of them micro, but a number of those events were greater than 0.5, which is of course the level at which fracking has to stop. Well, the one a week ago at 8:31 on Bank Holiday Monday was registered at 2.9. Now this is a significant order of magnitude greater than the 2.3 events triggered by Quadrilla back on April 1st, 2011, which ultimately led to the moratorium on fracking being put in place. Now, back in 2011, Quadrilla were doing everything they possibly could to deny that they were responsible for the seismic events being triggered from their activities at Priest Hall. But certainly by the August, then Quadrilla almost came clean and said it was highly probable that the seismic events had been triggered by their frack activities. Well, there's no doubt this time. It's not highly probable. Quadrilla were definitely responsible for triggering this event. And of course, the Oil and Gas Authority, being fairly astute, decided that they better put an immediate suspension on fracking activity, which they have done. But of course, this isn't good enough, because Francis Egan had once again stated categorically that fracking could be conducted at Preston New Road without triggering seismic events. Now, I don't know which crystal ball he's looking into, but it's a very different one than the rest of us, because it didn't take a rocket scientist to work out that all of the seismic activity that they had triggered with their first well had effectively primed the geology, so that it really didn't take very much at all to trigger off a few more events, like 100 plus. And if Quadrilla ever fire up the pump trucks at Preston New Road again, then guess what? It's going to trigger more seismic events. But of course, being the sociopathic corporatists that they are, they will never admit that. Plus, of course, it's a nice little gravy train, because Francis Egan is pulling around about $500,000 a year for running this Ponzi basically knowing fine well that the likelihood of success is zero. But it's amazing how you can just keep going when you got $500,000 a year coming in one way or another. So, this now is going to fall on the government. Well, the person responsible for pulling the plug this time round is Andrea Leadsom. Now, of course, she is the new Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, but she's been here before because a few years ago she was the Minister of State, so the subordinate role to the Secretary. And, of course, the previous Secretary of State, Greg Clark, was very quiet on the subject, preferring to leave it to the somewhat more garrulous intellectual pygmy of Claire Perry, because Claire Perry just liked the limelight and, basically could be wound up and pointed in the direction of a camera and off she would go. Meanwhile, Greg Clark seeking to keep his hands clean from being tarred with the fracking brush, because he clearly has ambitions to move into a sort of leadership role at some future date. Well, this time it's absolutely on the desk of Andrea Leadsom. And although she may try and push it to the Minister of State, the reality is it falls on her because she's the one with the experience here. So it's put the pressure on Andrea Leadsom, the MP for South Northamptonshire, because she is the one who now basically holds the future of these targeted communities in her hands. And the right thing for her to do, of course, now would be to, yes, commission an independent research party, truly independent, of course. And again, it's not going to take a rocket scientist to actually predict that any truly independent panel would come to the determination that the geology of the UK is totally unsuitable for fracking. And, in the area around Blackpool, that's an area that hasn't been mined. So the geology is still relatively pure, although highly faulted. But once you get across into East Lancashire and across into particularly South Yorkshire, North Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, then you are fracking into areas that have been mined extensively over the previous 2.5 centuries. So keep the pressure on, because we are now, I believe, in the dying days of the unconventional hydrocarbons industry in the UK. The only justification would perhaps be in the event of a global conflict, but even then there are alternatives and there's no need to go down that particular path. But the onus is on the communities, the targeted communities who have the misfortune to be living in these sacrifice zones, to keep the pressure on their MPs, to keep the pressure on Andrea Leadsom to pull the plug on the unconventional hydrocarbons industry in the UK once and for all. It cannot be done safely. Well, of course, there's other issues that need to be addressed, not least, of course, the issue of David Noakes and Lynn Dyer. Lynn being currently a guest of the French judicial system, being holed up in Fleury-Mérogis prison to the south of Paris. And please, if you can, get along to London on Wednesday, the 11th of September for the GcMAF awareness event. Then obviously please do so. There is still currently only one coach running down from East Lancashire, and the details of that coach are on my website at ianrcrane.com. We will be looking at seeing if there is a feasibility for other coaches, but if we do lay them on, then people are going to need to take them up pretty quick, obviously, to be sure that we can cover the costs. Well, the other area of attack, of course, is 5G, and this is not in Andrea Leadsom's portfolio, but it's in her colleague Nicky Morgan. And Nicky Morgan, I think another failed solicitor who went into politics, but nonetheless, she's perfectly primed for the role as Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. This is an interesting title for this department, with the responsibility for rolling out 5G, because it seems that the rollout of 5G, which has not been proven to be safe, but has been proven to be carcinogenic, and i.e. causing cancer, and that is now classified as a sport. So the sport here for the corporatocracy is to see how quickly they can roll out 5G without the majority of the population realizing just what is occurring and the pernicious agenda associated with the 5G. And if it happens, then obviously the 6G, 7G, 8G, and until such time as people are literally living in full spectrum radiation. And guess what, that probably forces them underground or somewhere. Anyway, we have the 5G awareness tour kicking off on Saturday. It kicks off in North Devon at Appledore. And then next week on Monday, it's in Bristol, Tuesday, Plymouth, Wednesday, Bournemouth, Thursday, Brighton, and Friday in Canterbury. So that'll be the first week in the south of England, and the second week it goes to, I can't remember where it goes now. London on the Wednesday, I know that, and then to Reading, and then moving north. The full details of the 5G awareness tour are on ianrcrane.com and alternativeview.co.uk. And, you know, it would be a tremendous help if people do book advance tickets, because that certainly helps us with the cash flow for the tour. But otherwise, you know, just come along, rock up, and even if you think 5G is a great idea, then come along and join in the discussion, because I think that we have sufficient evidence to demonstrate that any right-thinking individual, any individual that still retained capability and capacity for empathy with humanity, would realize that this is not a good idea. This is an experiment. This is the populations of the countries looking to roll out 5G being experimented upon. And even those that are rolling it out don't realize what is involved here. It is truly amazing how easy it is for the salary check to literally shut people's powers of analysis, of powers of discretion, shut it down, and just stay focused on the mission, which is to roll out 5G, the benefit of whom, or which, will be with the state and with the corporatocracy, and not for the people. So please, this is a big one. You know, with fracking, it is now 7 years since I threw my hat into the ring and decided that basically, you know, we needed to try and do whatever it took to prevent this abomination from being rolled out in the UK. And fortunately, you know, as the realization has spread, then it's certainly the case now that the unconventional gas agenda really isn't likely to go anywhere, and the sooner that those mugs who invested in it realise that, the better. 5G, we don't have 7 years. We probably barely have maybe 15 months, maybe until the end of 2020. And a lot can happen in that time, and a lot needs to happen in that time. In Hong Kong, already people have taken angle grinders to the facial recognition masks. And of course, the facial recognition system is all part of the integrated 5G network, the Internet of Things. That just about sums you up. You're a thing. That's all the corporatocracy sees you as, a thing. If you want to be experimented on, then carry on. If you don't, if you want to start to take an interest in the well-being of your family and certainly future generations, then now is the time to get involved. This is the autumn of some very, very significant discontent. But it's going to be down to the people to determine whether or not this agenda gets rolled out or whether sanity prevails. Well, you have a great day, and I will be back with you on Wednesday morning at 8:30, and let's hope that the Oil and Gas Authority are instructed to do the right thing by Andrea Leadsom and just say, you know what, enough's enough. We've blown enough on this. We've screwed up enough lives around the country. We've kept enough people in uncertainty for long enough, and now it's time to pull the plug. Have a great day.